Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Weekly Wake Up, our weekly opportunity for employees to talk directly to district staff and leadership in regards to the biggest things that are going on in our district. I do want to start with a somber note. As you guys know, a week ago today, we had a very traumatic situation, shooting that happened at the King Superstore in Boulder on Table Mesa. And so we do want to begin the show by recognizing that great loss that we had in our community. We had two former students, one from Fairview and one from Centaurus, that passed away in that action. We, of course, know of the stories that have now aware of the stories that happened in that store, including, heroic efforts to try to move people. We were at least aware of one employee that was in the store and was moved to safer ground by employees inside that store. But we also know that former students of ours were participating in that. A barista at Starbucks, from what I've heard in coverage, was able to help move people away from the action. We also want to recognize that we had parents of graduates that also passed away in this tragedy. It's definitely something that is impacting our entire community. This morning, as I was coming in, the flags were at half staff. Beautiful morning with the moon, shining, the near full moon shining above the Ed Center, but certainly a reminder of that situation. I do appreciate the statement that they've made that we are Boulder strong, and really Boulder Valley, I know, is coming together. All of us together have been impacted by this. Many of us have been to that store. We knew these people that were involved. Or just the idea of this being in our community is very tough. So I do want to recognize the loss that we had in this community. Also direct your attention to the email that went out yesterday that has a lot of resources in there to support employees, both in terms of your own wellness. That's first and foremost. We want to make sure that everyone's aware of the EAP services that are available. Additionally, there were some great thoughts from our trauma team, our trauma response team, who have been doing an excellent job. Do want to bring your attention to that. Plus, they have been building up some resources, knowing that our teachers will be working with students starting tomorrow back into the classroom. And so do want to recognize all those resources that are there. We'll continue to share additional material as it becomes available. This morning, I do want to continue our series of weekly wake-ups. It is tough to make that transition into what we're doing in the school district, but I am actually really fired up about this situation. And before I talk all about what we're doing, I do want to just mention that we are taking questions as always. If you have something through the course of the show that you want to ask a question about, just send it to us by bit.ly, that's bit.ly/BVSD wakeup, and we will take those throughout the show today. I'm going to stop presenting, but I will talk about today. This is really a topic, and again, hard to make this transition, but it is something that really fires me up, and I know that it's firing up a lot of our staff right now. The All Together for All Students strategic plan. We are so excited to actually be seeing that work, beginning in our schools. And so we've got a group of people. Our main focus today is elementary educators, but we welcome anybody that might be joining us today. Lots to talk about today. So let me go and get to introducing the panel that is with us. Let's start with Area Superintendent Sam Messier, who covers our Northwest network. Good morning, Sam.
Good morning, everybody.
We've got Chris Breck, who is our School and Network Leadership Coordinator. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning.
Good morning. Angel Stoba, our Director of Language Arts and Humanities in the Southwest Network. Good morning, Angel.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Kristen Donnelly, the BVSD Director of STEM, and she's in our North and West Network. Cannot talk this morning. Good morning, Kristen.
Good morning, all.
Jennifer Garfield, Director of Curriculum and Standards, also for the Northwest Network.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Julie, and I forgot to ask, how do you pronounce that last name? Correct, I'd rather not mess it up, so you tell me. She's a teacher on special assignment for strategic initiatives. Good morning.
Good morning. My last name is Ben-Mela.
Ben-Mela, I'm so sorry. I should have asked before we got started here. If you've ever watched Weekly Wake Up, you can see me slaughter names every week. So I wanted to try to avoid that. And Ming, I'm going to have you do the same thing, just so I'm going to get on a roll of messing things up here. I do, of course, know all of you, but pronouncing names on a Monday morning is tougher than you might think. Also, Tosa for Strategic Initiatives. Good morning, Ming.
Good morning. My last name is Scheid.
Scheid, thank you. And finally, we have three amazing TOSA's strategic initiatives. The last is Shannon Gamble. Good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Now, did I mess that up? Because it's quite possible. Okay.
No, you got it.
I do, again, just want to mention that we will take questions. We've already gotten a few this morning, and so we really thank you for that. But Sam, why don't we go and have you set up the stage a little bit in regards to this strategic plan, and as I was mentioning, the rubber has really hit the road now, so to speak. We've been talking about this for some time. I remember that first session in which we all gathered at the Ed Center and started talking about what was needed and the data that was available to us. Now we're asking people to participate.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we sort of take the dial back time to fall of 2018, that was when we really began working in earnest on the strategic plan and engaging folks, engaging stakeholders, whether they were community members or teachers or just generally parents and students, to engage them in looking at the data for our district, but also dreaming about what ideally we would most want for the students in our district and how we could best set them up to be successful in their postgraduate lives. And one of the things that I think stands out about BVSD is that we are, without a doubt, a very high achieving district. Our results over time have shown really high achievement compared to other districts in the state. But at the same time, we have this persistent achievement gap, specifically for students of color, students who are receiving meal assistance, students with IEPs, students who are emerging bilinguals. Those groups of students historically have not performed at the level of their peers. And our belief is very much that is about a gap in opportunity that creates that achievement gap for students. And we also have a very strong belief that we have incredible teachers at BVSD. We are so fortunate that we have an incredibly experienced teacher force, very skilled, a number of teachers with master's level degrees, many with doctoral degrees who are teaching in our classrooms, folks who've been with us a long time. And our belief is that we have great teachers. And if we still have an achievement gap after 20 years, it's not because our teachers have failed us. It's because we have failed to give them the support in terms of the systems and structures that allow them to focus on the right work with their kids. As we talk about the scope and sequence today, I want to be very clear that I believe that every single one of our teachers out there has the capacity to build their own scope and sequence. It's not that teachers cannot do this work. They can. All of our teachers know how to take standards and build a scope and sequence out of it. The power comes when we do that collaboratively, when we do that together, and when we commit to one scope and sequence for kids, because that ensures that we're being transparent with our students about what we want them to learn. It ensures that they don't miss out on content that they're going to need later on when they hit a higher grade level and some more challenging content. It ensures that there's some predictability, and it really wraps around our arms around our kids in a way to create the consistency and the systems that they need to be successful no matter what classroom they land in. And so I believe that this scope and sequence is going to help our students in a lot of ways, but it is also going to help our teachers. I think ultimately it's going to mean less work for teachers. I believe that we'll be able to take some of the heavy lifting out of that work. One of the things we found out recently is that we had a study done on the amount of time that our teachers were spending curating resources and creating activities. They're spending a huge amount of time culling through materials online to try to find lessons, to try to find texts to use with students. And that's time that we should be helping them with, right? Our teachers shouldn't have to be spending 10 to 20 hours a week finding materials online. That's the type of work that a district can do when we all come together collaboratively to make sure that we're providing those resources so that teachers can focus on how to best customize that for their kids. And I apologize, I went on for a long time about that, but I'm really passionate about the fact that I believe in the work that we're doing with this strat plan. And I believe the scope and sequence is a critical foundational component that will allow us to build on so that we can really make sure that we're serving the needs of our kids and also supporting our teachers with the tools that they need.
And I really appreciate you talking about that. I mean, we are going to talk in the, it's part of the show in regards to, there have been some concerns from folks about that we're going to be asking people to march in some sort of lockstep in the classroom, and that's not our intent. We really want to honor the fact that we have amazing teachers here. And additionally, I know that, there's been a lot of work that's gone into this, but, oftentimes this is really the first part that people are hearing about it. But if you haven't heard before, when the superintendent talks about it, this is not a focus on, as Sam was saying, failures of teachers. This is really trying to fix things at a district level that we recognize can be made stronger and improved, and really focusing on that. So I do want to make sure that we continue to make sure that people understand that that's what the focal point is. I do want to.
Can I speak quickly to that? I just want to elaborate on that not being in lockstep just a little bit, because that is also super critical. I need folks to hear that we never want to be a district that says you need to be on this page on this date and on this lesson with kids on this particular day. We know that doesn't work. That kind of compliance doesn't work. It's not what we're aiming for with this system. We know that teachers need the flexibility and the discretion to adapt the day-to-day lessons for the strengths and needs of their kids. And so we always want to preserve that degree of flexibility so that our teachers have the professional discretion to do what's actually best for kids in the moment.
I mean, we know that the most powerful thing is when you've got a kid that's right there. You've got the the daily, weekly, regular assessments that you're doing, and what that kid needs to be able to adapt to that. But at the same time, like I know that a lot of what we're talking about here is the idea that a kid in the same school in the same grade might be learning something completely different, or you might, if you were to switch schools, that really is seen at a middle school level, for instance, where you've got different schools coming in, and then you've got these teachers that are having to sort of handle all this disparate stuff that's been taught. And again, no fault of the teacher. They were following their best gut on what was to be taught. But we need to have a little bit of a district-wide idea of what this is. And then at the same time in the classroom, they can still be teaching specifics, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think that when we talk about defining a scope and sequence, we're talking about deciding collaboratively with teachers what the most important standards are to teach and in what order to teach those, and really thinking about that order at the unit level, that we do this unit first, that we really make sure that we focus on these specific prioritized standards for that unit. Then we move on to the next unit and we make sure that kids have actually mastered the things from that first unit. And if they haven't, then let's make sure that we give those kids some additional experiences that help them master those standards as we're moving into that next unit.
I do want to make sure to mention, I said, this might be the first time that some teachers are hearing about this, but we really have had teachers incorporated throughout the entire picture. Early on at that very beginning stage of trying to figure out what should be done and looking at all that data along the way and looking at the standards and prioritizing them, that kind of thing. I'm going to bring up a graphic, and I don't know, Sam, if it's you or Jen that want to speak to this. I can't share my screen, it says suddenly. That's funny. Let me see if we can do this way. It's funny. Okay, can you guys see the graphic now coming up? Okay.
Yep, we can.
It kind of freaked me out for a second when it says you can't do that. It was like Hal from 2001. Okay. So again, we started, a ways back, but every step of the way we've had teachers involved in that. Who can speak to me about that?
Jen, do you want to take this one? Because you've been so closely involved with so much of this work.
Yeah, no problem. So Sam mentioned before that when we were starting to onboard the strategic plan in spring 2019, we had several feedback sessions, staff feedback sessions. We also held in that same spring an open community equity summit. So that summit was really around, we had some of the initiatives, and we just dove deeper with community members, teachers, and so forth, to look at those and opportunities to look at those standards more deeply for equitable experiences. And then last school year, we began to launch the phase 1 initiative. So Dr. Anderson visited the schools and spoke about those initiatives. We started to onboard some of our teachers in the work through the 1A and 1B. So we had standards prioritization work occurring at the secondary level with over 100 educators. The 1B research task force took off last school year as well with 55 educators, and essential skill work also coincided with that work. Last summer, a group of about 110 elementary educators were able to participate in the Standards Institute, a 4-day institute where we looked really closely at the 2020 standards, and we prioritized those using common criteria that we use with secondary as well. We also were lucky to have 155 K-12 educators participate in unit development last summer. Some of you have used those units this year, and we thank those people for that wonderful work last summer. Now in the winter, spring, you've now seen the year at a glance, and we've had some feedback to that. We've been calling in some small groups of teachers to support us first prior to building the year at a glance, as well as just through this revision cycle. And then very soon, in the next few weeks, we're going to be having some opportunities to do some work this spring, as well as in the summer with reading and math and social studies, science, and writing units. So stay tuned for those opportunities coming within days and weeks.
There is so much going on right now. And I also I love to post it to Sam. You know, one of the conversations that we were having is obviously during the pandemic, you know, a lot of things got put on ice. You know, because we were just, I mean, everybody's just been so busy. And yet, you know, one of the conversations I know that we were having, at least at the leadership level, was really the idea that a lot of the things that we are talking about here today are really needed right now. And, you know, more so because we've got kids that are, you know, that are really needing to catch up and that kind of thing. This is really important for us to be doing a lot of this work right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's been a really difficult balance to strike exactly the right balance there during the time that we're in when we're in a pandemic. I've heard lots of people ask, you know, teachers are exhausted right now. Why are we asking people to come together and give feedback on a scope and sequence or think about implementing lessons in a different order than they've done before next year? And I get it, man. Teachers, my heart goes out to you. You guys are incredible. You're some of the heroes of the pandemic, for sure. And I can't imagine how hard it's been for you to be teaching kids week to week, day to day, and making that a reality no matter what the circumstances have been. So I think that we've been trying to honor that and minimize the amount of time that we're asking people to give to committee work and to come in and participate in building the year at a glance. But we also really want to make sure we have teacher voice in that, because we need to have teacher voice in that. Our belief, the way that we operate, is that if we're going to build tools that teachers are going to use, teachers need to help build those tools because they're the ones who are ultimately going to be using them in the classroom with kids. And so we've tried to strike that balance. I do believe there is urgency to having these systems and structures complete. One of the advantages of having a common scope and sequence is that it'll make it much easier for us to align intervention tools in the fall, so that if we do have students, we know our students are going to come back to us in the fall with having changed in a lot of ways. Some of those changes may be positive, right? Many of our students may have developed some new strengths and talents as a result of the pandemic. But I think we also have to be realistic that some of our students are going to have some gaps in their learning and are going to need some intervention in order to make up those gaps so that they can stay on pace with grade level content. And in order to do that, we need to have a really robust suite of interventions. Having a common scope and sequence allows us to invest in specific interventions that go with those specific pieces of content in a way that I believe that we'll be able to much better support kids in the fall.
And I know as we're supporting kids, the idea of everyone having the baseline things is so key. You know, I know that another conversation that we oftentimes have is just how many state standards. No teacher can ever teach all the standards. And I'll mention one other thing that always comes to mind in this sort of conversation. But, you know, one teacher may, you know, really think penguins are important and decide, you know, that they're going to do that unit every time. And that, again, you know, to a certain extent, if that's, you know, an interest of them and their students, great. But we want to make sure that, you know, there's a coordination so that we can meet the needs of the students that are out there. So I do want to kind of get into, you know, Jen was talking about the idea of, you know, that there was a Standards Institute, a real conversation about what standards, you know, we want to sort of prioritize. Again, that doesn't mean that a teacher can't teach another standard. There's this whole bucket of things that the state puts out there. Jen or somebody else, can you guys kind of talk about, you know, sort of what that looked like and how we've decided on the ones that we, and again, the teacher voice has been a critical part of this, right?
Yeah, so that would be when we had the secondary educators as well as elementary educators. We brought teachers in for sort of a Standards Institute or different work sessions. We looked at the 2020 Colorado academic standards, and then using criteria of leverage, continuity, and relevance, we use those as criteria to sort of hold up the most important, those priority standards, and then making the claim that when you go deep in depth with those prioritized standards, you'll be using the supporting standards, sort of the remainder of standards, to really engage our students and to go more deeply with those ideas. So we were able to prioritize in the core content areas all K-12 Colorado academic standards, and those are on our website and so forth. And teachers were also introduced to those standards at the beginning of this year, asking to begin to explore and implement those as best as they can this year. The year at a glance really starts to dive more deeply into that implementation for next school year.
And I want to make sure, I think Ming's going to help us talk about that. I'm going to bring up that particular document. If you guys haven't seen it before, this year at a glance that's now available. Let me present it so it's prettier. Can everybody see that okay? Mm-hmm. So Ming, tell us a little bit about what this is and how it's supposed to work.
Yes, and sorry, Randy, I'm going to piggyback off of what Jen just said for a second too, and just say the Institute was a really great opportunity, especially in science, because those are the new NGSS science standards. So for a lot of teachers, it was their first time seeing these science standards. So it was great that we were able to kind of align the rollout of those standards with our standards prioritization work. So I just wanted to piggyback on that real quickly. But yeah, this that you're seeing on your screen now is what we are calling our year at a glance. So essentially what we did at the beginning of the school year was we took the work that the teachers did over the summer with prioritizing standards, and we worked to kind of bundle those prioritized standards together into kind of themes or units that we then put together in a specific sequence. That we looked for things like conceptual build over time. We looked at things like student readiness and age appropriateness moving along, and then also what's best for our emerging bilinguals. And so through that standards bundling and then establishing a sequence and determining a pacing for how long it may take to teach this mini standards or whatnot in a unit, we developed this year at a glance. So we started with science and social studies. And what people will probably notice as the biggest change in science and social studies is that they are integrated as much as possible. And then we worked with our reading team, our language arts and humanities team, and then our STEM team to develop the other year at a glances for reading, writing, phonics, and math.
And I know that it's these areas are so much stronger when we interconnect. And so we've got this great panel. And I also want to just give a shout out and apologize to Michelle Kazi. I see that you are on the call today. I did not. She's amazing. Oversees our reading area, and so I want to make sure I shout out to her that she's on the call as well. But I do want to go around and then have everybody kind of talk about their area and how the content's going to how things are going to be integrated there. So why don't I start with Jen and Kristen to talk about science and social studies.
Kristen, take it away, and I'll add as you finish up.
Okay, I think Ming said it really well. We tried to really integrate the science and social studies together where we could, trying to build connections. And I know that a lot of people are thinking, why science and social studies together? When you think about science being bundled, you think math right away. And we are going to make those connections as well. But I think having a bigger perspective of why the science is important in our community and touching base along the way with standards that we could connect is going to be very powerful for students. And so we really built those standards, leveraging the resources that we had as well. And so we were thinking about what do teachers need to use to teach these standards well, and really looking at the kids themselves and what they need to understand those standards. And Jen, would you like to add anything else to that?
Sure. So I think it's, quite scary if you look at those year at a glance documents and you just look at the titles and think, oh my gosh, where did the science go? And we promise, as former science director Sam and then myself and Kristen on the call, the science did not go away. So the science is where possible, really married to those social studies content. So, I'm thinking about plants, and what about the plants in my community? I'm going to take a nature walk to further investigate that. Another thing that I want to just mention since we're on this call is that although we are not renewing FOSS and going up to the 2020 update of FOSS, please know that we are aligned to the next generation science standards, which really emphasizes hands-on investigations and hands-on approach. So that is not going away. Students need to be investigating, getting their hands on materials. We will be providing materials for science exploration to the classrooms. It might look a little different. However, that will never go away. We know that that is good instructional practice. So those FOSS kits, the hands-on engagement piece is definitely critical, and it will 100% be there for you. I think we've covered the science and social studies area. So go ahead, Randy.
No, and I do want to mention that we did get a question, we were talking about it beforehand, and I think you guys answered it, but just in case there's anything else, I do want to just recognize that we got this question from a teacher over at Aspen K8 who said, I've got some deep concerns about what I've seen so far. Other districts are focusing on STEM, highly engaging kids and research back, closing achievement gaps, et cetera. But, again, I think she was looking at that year in a glance and kind of saying it didn't seem like on face value that science was really, but again, the message that you want her to, or them to know is really, that science is going to be a huge part of what's going on there. Okay.
And I think if I may add a little to that, we're also looking at a STEM pilot and a cohort to involve teachers to really look at how the resources that we have, the FOSS kits, the Maker kits, Dreambox, and our other tech tools will integrate into all of our content areas. And we really want to provide advancement opportunities to all students so that we don't have kids trapped and only certain students get those opportunities starting in elementary, and then it really traps them all the way to high school. We need to open up our pathways. So we really will be, as Jen said, and I think Sam said earlier, calling on teachers and asking them to help us with their expertise and how we can create more STEM-based units and application opportunities throughout the year.
Perfect. Thank you so much for addressing that directly. Let's go to Julie and Shannon for reading and phonics.
Sure. I'll get started with talking a little bit about the reading year at a glance. I think there's three big things that are important to know about the thinking that went into organizing the reading, writing, communicating standards. The first thing is that the reading, CLDE, and language arts and humanities teams all worked in collaboration to develop this section of the year at a glance, because you can't separate reading, writing, communicating. They're all interconnected there. one of the first principles we kind of used to guide our work was that content and literacy, when brought together, really support language development. And so opportunities to connect content in meaningful ways with the reading units are built into the year at a glance. The second thing is that we also know that reading and writing are reciprocal processes. And so even though you'll see reading and writing as separate strands on that year at a glance, they're designed to really connect so that students are reading and writing in similar ways, so that what they're learning about things that authors do is what they're going to then do as writers as well. And then the third thing I think that's important to know is that, you know, guiding all of this work, as you've heard other people speak to today, is this idea of really lifting up and prioritizing some of those high leverage standards, is really giving students an opportunity to go deeper with less, and for teachers to have more time to teach those prioritized standards really well. And so we've taken those prioritized standards and bundled them into more cohesive units across the year, either 4 or 6 units across the year. I'll kind of leave it at that and see, Julie, if you have anything to add there.
So you said it very well. I think the other things that I would add would be just to, again, to reiterate that my role was really looking at how can we ensure that there's connectivity across the day? How can we ensure that there's constantly opportunities to connect language, literacy, and content meaning science and social studies, as well as content meaning math, and then back into the language development piece, and really look at ways that we can sort of set this framework, this ground level scenario, so that teachers have a place to begin to build. And that when we have this framework and we have this predictability, that we're not only supporting those students in our classrooms who are culturally and linguistically diverse, but we're supporting the teachers who are teaching them, because it's easier for teachers to hone in then on those specific faces that they're looking at in their classrooms every day and those specific needs. And so we really wanted to provide this framework that was building on those most equitable practices and supports that we could bring across the day.
And Shannon, did you want to add a little bit more as well?
Yeah, I just wanted also to talk a little bit about the pulling out the phonics word study as kind of this separate bar that you see on the year at a glance, and just to explain that a little bit. So we talked about the reading standards being prioritized and bundled in these, you know, meaningful, cohesive ways. And the reason that phonics word study is pulled out is because those instructional opportunities are aligned in an order of presentation that is developmentally appropriate. And so it's not in terms of prioritized standards, but in really looking at reading and writing development.
And so
Can I also add to that as well? They're also pulled out because then when we do that, we're able to better support our students who are learning in monolingual programming, as well as our students who are learning in bilingual programming. And when we get down to that really specific word level work, and that differs in our bilingual schools where students are learning through English and Spanish, as well as in our monolingual programming where students are learning through English and need to continue to have their language development supported. And finally, I'll also say that a third reason for separating that row out is because of the reciprocal nature of applying what we're doing in terms of readers, as well as in terms of writing. And so that same phonics and word study and the phonological awareness and those skills that we're building in that third row really are connected and woven throughout both reading and writing.
Perfect. And so I was going to bring up, we did get a question, from one of our teachers that asked about, it looks like a large percentage of the day is dedicated to phonos and Pinnell, which I think, again, is just, if you look at that year at a glance, that focal point that you guys were just talking about, so the question that they ask is, they said it's not approved by the state. Why are we dedicating time to integrating the F&P materials into content so that we can fully utilize the materials we purchased, ensure that kids are engaged in rigorous activities, still honoring the time, to teach things like social studies and science. What do you guys? What would you say to that question?
Yeah, I'll chime in there, Randy. So I think, one important thing, and I think Shannon and Julie expressed this really well, is that we want the standards to lead the way, not the instructional materials. So first and foremost, our scope and sequence is aligned to a progression of the standards that make sense for our kids. And we want to make sure that we're allowing ourselves the flexibility to, as eventually new materials get adopted in a variety of content areas, to be able to apply those to our scope and sequence. With Faunus and Pinnell, in terms of it not being approved by the state. So really the thing that it's not approved for is to purchase it using READ Act funds. So I want to be really clear about that's a rule that's put in place as part of the READ Act. And the READ Act was intended to give districts financial resources to be able to support struggling readers, as well as setting up some boundaries around assessment and things like that for struggling readers. So the money that we're given by the state to support the READ Act work in our district, we can't spend that on any program that's not approved by the state. But the state does not approve instructional materials for districts. The state delegates that authority to local districts. It's part of local control in our state. And so what instructional materials we decide to use for general purposes is entirely up to us, as long as they align to the standards and support our program. And I feel really confident that the process that we used in our district to identify Faunus and Pinnell Classroom, along with ReadyGen and foundations and some other resources for our bilingual schools, was a really strong process, and that we ended up with a suite of materials that really does a good job for us.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam, for jumping in there a little bit. I know connected to this, as already kind of said, is writing. Angel, what would you want to let people know about that aspect of things?
So the year at a glance does identify the main types of writing that we're going to focus on, and that will be evaluated throughout and at the end of each unit. So they're structured by narrative, informative, opinion, and argumentative writing. And as Shannon and Julie stated, we aligned the writing units to very closely to the reading units. So when students are reading informative texts in reading, they'll be learning about and writing informative texts during writing time. We've also will have the writing standards as part of the science and social studies units. So that way students will be able to connect to the research and other projects that are occurring in those content areas. So the focus is on the standards and how we've bundled them. So we'll be focusing on composition, sentence fluency, word choice, spelling, as well as grammar and mechanics, and in understanding and helping students to flexibly use the writing process independently. The assessments, we believe we're going to be continuing to use a similar structure as we've used in the past with the writing tasks and the common writing assessments. So you'll see again that connectedness throughout the day of content area writing and the writing that will connect to reading.
So again, when we're looking at this year at a glance, that's why when it comes to science, social studies, writing, and reading, that those units are so closely aligned. As you're looking down, top to bottom, that you've got these units that really, mimic each other. Is that what you're kind of saying?
This is a sampling of how they're structured. And in most cases, what you'll see is that writing and reading will be connected by time when we finalize the year at a glance. Science and social studies units, the timing may be not as tightly connected, but they will be similar in the time frames.
Okay. And I do want to bring up, and I think we did talk about this already, but a question that we just got was in regards to, again, I think it's just based, what you were just saying, but the idea of why is there no integration between science, reading, and writing? Knowing 4 or 5 well, science doesn't integrate naturally into social studies. I think the point here is that those are all integrated, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. On the work that we're doing as we're creating the units, we are aligning the standards within each of those content areas. So we're doing that work on the back end. So when you do see that science unit, you'll know that it is connected, that teachers will know that it is connected to the standards and connected to the work that's going on in writing.
Shannon.
I would also just add to that, that I think it's going to help us think about content literacy connections in a more complex way than maybe we have in the past. And so where we might not see, we're learning about plants, I'm reading books about plants. It might be something more connected to disciplinary literacy, where we're learning about science, so I'm learning to read and write like a scientist. And so I think teachers will see that those connections are really strong. Wherever possible, we connected topics as well, but we know that really what's most important for students is that the connections are really connected to understanding how their literacy skills help them access primary resources during social studies, or creating a lab report during science. And so using literacy to provide greater access to the content areas is going to be a really strong connection that I think we'll see come through in the year at a glance.
And Julie, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I wanted to add to that as well. The way that the year at a glance is laid out in different rows with different content areas is because we really are looking at those standards and needing to lift up which standards will be highlighted at different parts throughout the day. But then the reason why that they are aligned vertically is because we're really looking at how we can ensure that that students, that we build on what we know as humans, and what we know as learners, and what we know as how we interact across the day. We aren't just readers for 45 minutes or 2 hours a day, and then we stop being readers the rest of the day. Nor are we only critical thinkers who are thinking about the world around us in science and social studies for a small portion of the day, or only mathematicians, or only learning language in 45 minutes a day. We're doing all of those things across the day. But we also know that when we're building and developing and strengthening those skills, that we're lifting up and highlighting specific areas at specific times, and really to hone in on those, while at the same time having these other things happening. And so what we wanted to ensure is that while we have different themes where we have students who are perhaps, as Shannon talked about, reading about plants or learning about plants during their science and social studies time, and then applying that same thinking and what they're taking from science and social studies into literacy, and vice versa, will happen. And we want to ensure that we encourage that to happen, and that we build those opportunities for that constant connection, so that we too are building up the vocabulary and the interconnected language that students will be able to lift up and use across the day, while again, at the same time, highlighting specific areas of those standards. So it's kind of a fine line. We're lifting up these standards at one moment while we're ensuring that they're being applied and thought about across the day.
And I do want to just mention, and I think you guys have kind of spoken to this, but I think kind of the hang up here a little bit is just the idea that science and social studies are sort of grouped together in a band, and then you've got writing and reading. The idea wouldn't necessarily be, and I want to make sure my understanding is correct as well, but that science and social studies have to be taught together. I mean, you might have a social studies issue. I mean, there might be connections, and that's always even more interesting when Discovery had something to do with something that was going on politically or whatever. But the idea could be that it's a science item or it's a social studies item, but then again, it's getting tied into other areas down below. I see a thumbs up from Jen. Awesome. Okay, I'm going down the right road. Appreciate it.
So you'll notice that there's going to be a lot more integration of reading and writing, and seeing more application of reading and writing in science and social studies.
You don't only have to teach science if there's some sort of social studies connection, right? Okay. I'm saying again, head nods in case you're just seeing my face.
And Randy, just to clarify, yes, you're correct that there are going to be, in a year at a glance at a specific grade level, there could be just a standalone, this is a science unit, right? We're building on things that we've learned, but this is a science unit and a social studies unit. But where possible, we did try to integrate. So there's a mix of science, social studies, and science social studies. Perfect.
Another question that we got was from Emerald Elementary. The teacher asked, Faunus and Pinnell have a set scope and sequence. will that be revised to align with our year at a glance, or vice versa? Is ours being set up to match theirs? Who can chat with me about
Yeah,
that?
I can speak to that.
Okay.
So, the way that the Fountas and Pinnell materials are laid out, they're not really grouped into bigger units. They're these little umbrellas that are a week or maybe a half of a week long. And it's designed and intended to be used really flexibly. And there are three different ways that we could use the materials. Number one is using the suggested mini lessons across the year, which a lot of teachers have been using. And when we first receive the materials, that's what we encourage teachers to really lean on. Secondly, the publishers guide us to use those lessons responsive to our students' needs. So move them around depending on what it is that we see our students need. And the third suggestion that the publishers give us is to move and resequence things in accordance with your district scope and sequence. And so we're moving into that. The shift will be that up until this point, teachers have either been using the suggested mini lessons across the year or doing the work on their own to align it with, their own curriculum maps at their school. And so the shift is that we're all going to kind of match it with the year at a glance.
Okay, very good. We're going to move on to math here next, but I did want to ask, Michelle, did you have anything that you wanted to add since we're about to hop off of the literacy train here?
No, I really am here just as support, just in case, there was a question that, somebody wanted my input on there. So, but we're totally in good hands with the reading team here. And so I'm happy to remain silent.
I'll just ask you one quick question while I've got you up, if that's okay, which is just the idea that, that sequence that we were just talking about with Fountas and Pinnell. These efforts that are happening really do tie into our efforts in addressing dyslexia and some of these issues that we've got. Students have to kind of get these things in a certain progression, right? In order to, and I might be talking a little bit outside my expertise here, so correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, and so I think that Shannon addressed kind of the Fountas and Pinnell side of comprehension and vocabulary. And just that rich text, right? If you're gonna go really into dyslexia, right, and what students with dyslexia may need, first of all, that's really addressed, in that targeted instruction. But that's where Foundations comes in, right? That's why we have those two programs, right, to address all areas that students may need. And so with Foundations, it definitely, as Shannon had spoke to, with the phonics and word study, it has to follow a very specific scope and sequence. And so that's why that phonics and word study was pulled out. It's not necessarily the Fountas and Pinnell reading, it's the phonics and word study where that comes into play.
And thank you for correcting me on that. And you get extra points for having an Anchorman picture on your profile. So I just wanted to say that as well. Kristen, let's go to you with math. Let's talk about that area.
Okay, so math was really built in the same way the social studies and then science standards and the reading and writing and communication standards were. It's built around those priority standards that teachers helped us pull out. But while we're still leveraging our resources, math expressions, math talks, and our other district resources, like our Dream Box that we recently purchased for kids. Really what our goal is to look at a deeper level of math comprehension and incorporate math talks. We know that when kids speak the language of math, when they work in collaborative groups, they start to understand the math better. They also will have opportunities to apply that math in different ways as we connect it across all the content areas. One of the things as a math and science teacher myself, I'd always have kids come to me and say, why do we need to learn this? They didn't understand why they needed to know fractions and how they would use it in their lifetime, or why they would need to compare polygons, for example. So giving those opportunities to connect across the curriculum, I think is really powerful because it gives that understanding at a deeper level. And that's really what we're looking at. And, the year at a glance is just a start with this. What we hope is then from there, we have a living document that we take our teachers, the experts in the field, and they actually test it out in the field. And they come back to us and say, hey, we need to tweak here to improve this. And wouldn't it be cool to add this maker kit application because it works perfectly in this unit. So those types of opportunities that we've never done before, we've never connected our resources in a comprehensive way across the curriculum. And that's really the goal, especially in times of low funding. You want to leverage what you have and do it across content and be together in some consistent way.
I also love the way that you just said that. I think it helps us go into some of these questions that we've gotten from teachers this morning, which is, the idea that, I think, we're talking about this idea. This is going to be something that we want teachers to collaboratively work with us on. We haven't necessarily figured out every last thing. So let me bring up a question in regards to, how are teachers of multi-grades in one classroom expected to follow the scope and sequence from that grade? And this is something that has not been necessarily navigated yet, but will be something that we'll be considering.
Yeah, so that is a great question. And we know that we have many elementary teachers throughout the district at a variety of schools that teach multi-age classrooms. And that's something we're going to continue to explore and work with those schools where we have multi-aging occurring to figure out really how best to support folks and make decisions about scope and sequence in those multi-aging situations. Some of those are going to be unique, so that's something that we'll continue to work with schools and figure out how to best support them in leveraging the scope and sequence as a resource.
And Sam, I'll have you leave your microphone up for another second because I think this is along the same lines, but a teacher from Community Montessori asked, can you please speak to expectations in regards to focus schools and schools where programs group multiple grades together? I think, again, it's that idea, similar answer probably, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So a school like Community Montessori, which has a program focus on Montessori methods, or a school like Whittier Elementary that is an IB primary years program, they have some specific curricular needs. So we'll definitely work with those schools to figure out how to best help them align their work to the BVSD scope and sequence, and figure out how to do that in a way that doesn't compromise the core of what they've committed to as a program focus for their school.
Okay. Another question that we got was in regards to, are we required to teach the exact unit plans or just make sure that we're meeting the power standards within each unit?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I think that what it boils down to is as folks start to look at the units themselves, they'll see that they're broken into 3 stages. So stage 1 is really about the what. It's really detailing the standards and also the essential skills that we want students to master as a part of participating in this unit. That's tight, right? So that's absolutely tight. We want people to stick to these are the standards that we're focusing on and the essential skills that we're focusing on. Stage 2 is the assessment. And I think that's where we, depending on the level of flexibility that a school has, will depend on how much of the district created assessments that we want them to use versus them creating their own assessments to assess that content. But the expectation there is that they're assessing students on the standards that are called out in stage 1. And then stage 3 is really about operationally, how do we get there, right? How do we get students to master that content? And there will be a recommended sequence of sort of big chunks of material. And we absolutely recommend that people follow those broad, big chunks. But I think there is some flexibility there. If teachers are able to, if they have their own way of getting kids to mastery of those same standards, and they're able to do that within that chunk of time, that's the important part, is that we cover those standards within that chunk of time, and we cover them to the degree that students are mastering them at a level that they're able to perform well on the assessment that's called out in stage 2.
Excellent. Thank you for all that detail there. Here's another question that we got from Fireside. You were just mentioning about assessments. The teacher asked, will new units have to be aligned to common assessments?
Yeah, we would absolutely want our common assessments to have some alignment to our units. Now, our common assessments in the new assessment system that we're thinking about, the common assessments are more interim or benchmark assessments that happen 2 to 3 times throughout the year. They're separate from the unit assessments, which will be sort of end of unit culminating assessment experiences. But to the degree that we can, we're going to try to sync up those unit assessments with those common assessments so that they overlap and that we're able to find some efficiencies there and not over assess students, but try to minimize the number of checkpoints that we're doing. We, in some cases, will be able to use, I think, or tweak some of our existing common assessment tools. In other cases, we may need to do something a little bit different. So, I think in writing, our common writing tasks are going to be pretty applicable. In mathematics, we might have to make some adjustments for some of those assessments to make them a little bit easier to both to administer to students and to score, so that that's an efficient process.
Perfect. And thank you for letting me go down the list here of all these great questions that we've gotten this morning from teachers. This one's from Lafayette Elementary. How and when do kids get additional experiences if they haven't mastered those prioritized standards in the unit? Are we building in some sort of intervention model for each building?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and that's absolutely a critical component of this. So that's where I think all of the pieces of the strategic plan and the instructional infrastructure that we're building come together, right? So where we have this scope and sequence and we have some common aligned assessments, the power comes in ensuring that if we have students who on that assessment show that they haven't mastered that content, that there are opportunities for those kids to relearn, for us to reteach those evidence outcomes or those standards that have not been mastered by some students. So I really believe that we're going to be able to address the necessary interventions for students and also provide some extensions, because we also need to acknowledge there are going to be some kids in our district that know some of the content before we've even started the instruction. And so we're going to have to build in some opportunities to provide extensions for those students, so that we're really working with every kid to help move them forward in their learning from wherever they are.
I once saw a drawing of this kind of idea where you've got these like lanes that are going, that we're trying to capture, but then there's like this kind of space in between. To that point, you can have kids that are really, either behind or forward in that lane. So, Ming.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think it's really important to know that a piece of prioritizing standards is that just because they're in one unit doesn't mean they're not going to show up somewhere else. So our hope would be that our kids would have opportunities to show their understanding in a variety of units, and sometimes even in a variety of content areas. That's why we have such great pathways for cross-curricular connections, so that we can help our kids see and be successful maybe in a way that they aren't able to access somewhere else. So I think it's really important for people to know that when we were designing this, it kind of lends itself really nicely to reteaching, because these prioritized standards come up over and over again, and kids are going at a deeper level rather than I have to teach all of these standards, and so I'm going to move on because we just have to get through all of them, right? We're focusing on that depth, which will hopefully help with the reteaching piece as well.
Thank you for that. Kristen, do you want to add something?
Yes, I think I just want to wrap this up to the beginning of our conversation when Sam talked a little bit about how we're trying to take some basic structure off teachers' plates, so they're not spending 20 hours looking for resources. If you can get a consistency of what they should be teaching when, and you have some consistent data that they can all have data talk around, then really what they're concentrating on is the how to teach, and how are we going to differentiate and give intervention on grade level and extension opportunities in the same classroom at the same time. So this whole project is really, in my mind, freeing teachers up to think about that and they're great alone, but when they come together and are able to collaborate and have a common place to start those discussions, then I think we can move kids much farther. And that's really our goal here, is to be able to do this. As a teacher, I always struggled with how do you do all of those at once at the same time? Well, this is our starting point to be able to provide that opportunity.
Perfect. Ming, is your hand still up from before, or is that new? Okay. Just want to make sure. I know we're running out of time. It's 8 o'clock now, but I do want to get to a few other questions that we got. I think Kristen had mentioned Dreambox. Will students have access to Dreambox through the summer?
Yes, they will. We're using it in our summer school, and as well as the contract if any kids are at home and they just want to jump in and play, more power to them. It's a lot of fun.
Love that. Okay. Will district leaders help develop centers of literacy and math for primary grades? This was from, I think, Louisville Elementary.
The instructional units will provide guidance for the universal instruction for reading. So which mini lessons, interactive read alouds, and shared reading pieces to use, and for ReadyGen, which materials and which units to pull in from ReadyGen for universal instruction. So I hope that answers the question.
Okay, thank you for that. Last question, and then I wanted to hit a couple other quick topics, and I know we're running way low on time here, but we got a question from Angevine. Will math interventions include academic support classes? And then they also wanted to know at the middle level, will middle level FTE be allocated for such classes? So I know that's getting a little out of our lane here for today, but anything that we'd want to say about that?
Yeah, I think that academic support classes are going to probably continue to play a role at the secondary level. I think that's just to me, that's a venue in which intervention can take place, but it's not the only venue in which intervention can take place. And I think Kristen described it really well, is that what we're trying to do is expand the ability of the classroom teacher to build those interventions and extensions into the regular class period for students. So instead of spending that 20 hours a week coming up with lessons and planning lessons, you're devoting that time to figuring out, how am I going to effectively differentiate this material for the range of kids that I have in my class? I know that, Randy over here is going to need a little something extra to be able to scaffold this lesson for him so that he can be successful. And I know Shannon over here is learned this 2 years ago and is going to need something else productive to do to help her learning move forward. So really helping people focus on that. So ASCs, I think, will continue to exist, and they'll continue to be a place in which intervention happens, but we don't want them to be the only place. They shouldn't be the only place that intervention or extension are happening.
Perfect. And I thank you so much for answering all the teacher questions. I've got two last ones that have to do with trimester and how that impacts report cards. I don't want to miss out on saying that, but I do want to warn everybody that the last thing I'll do is just go around to everybody and give you a chance if we haven't said anything, or if you want to talk about, if you need a topic, what you hope that this will look for. So is there anybody that might be able to tell us, we are moving from trimesters to quarters, what was the thinking behind that, and what will actually be the impact?
So I think there's actually some really good news here, which is at elementary, you only do report cards twice a year instead of 3 in the new system. So report cards will be due after the second quarter and after the fourth quarter. After the first and third quarters, that would be a more informal update to parents during the conference period. Ming or Jen, do you want to add anything to that?
Since I'm sharing a computer with Sam, I can add on that the 2020 standards will be aligned at elementary in our report cards. So please know that we will do the new standards alignment with the report cards that will be beginning in the 21-22 school year. Ming, anything else I'm forgetting with report cards?
Nope.
Nice and simple answer. I love that. Okay, let's go around. Anything that we missed, or if you want to talk about, again, as we're looking forward, what you hope that this will be. I know a lot of folks with new things always worry about stuff, but there's a lot of excitement around this as well. So I want to make sure that we're able to say that. Kristen, why don't we start with you?
Really, all I have to say is I can't wait to work with teachers moving forward on this process. It's been very interesting hearing their thoughts, and I can't wait to leverage their expertise and work with them on the piece of how we make this a possibility to differentiate in the classroom and pull in all our great district resources, from FOSS kits to Maker kits to you name it. So to me, I'm just really excited, and hope that they look out for any messages that ask them to give their voice and expertise.
And I want to say it again, the idea here is collaboration. We want teachers to be involved in this moving forward, both obviously in your own classroom, but then also at the district level. So thank you for that. Angel.
I'm excited to talk more with teachers about disciplinary literacy and the connectedness into content area instruction, and bringing reading and writing throughout the day, threading it throughout the day, and look forward to meeting with teachers to have them take a look at work we're doing and provide more input, more feedback, so that we can ensure that we have something that we're putting forward and in front of our kids for their benefit.
Thank you. Julie.
I'm really excited at this opportunity to begin with a framework and to begin with a place where we're all feeling comfortable where we are and feel supported for the materials and the scope and sequence that we have, so that we can really bring together this community in a way that hones in and ensures that all of our students are doing well, and that we really are a district for all. And that we have the space and the time and the ability and the collective support to be able to know how to do that and feel confident, so that our students all feel confident as they're leaving our system. And I'm really excited for this opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you, Julie. Michelle, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'm just going to say that I'm really excited about the work as well, in that it will support students to support support teachers so that they can support students, and really get us on a path to close the gap for all kids.
Perfect. Thank you. Shannon.
I would love for teachers just to know that, you know, those of us doing this work are in our hearts, and first and foremost, we are teachers, and that at times it can feel really lofty and kind of big picture, but just to reassure you that every step of the way, we are keeping as much of a one foot in the classroom as we can, and asking ourselves, and what is this going to look like in reality? And what's the practical piece of this going to be? And so, you know, just anybody who is maybe having any fears or concerns about some of these changes, just to reassure you that we are doing this with you in mind, and feeling really confident that this is going to make your work feel more aligned and cohesive, and that you will be able to better support kids through this.
Awesome. Thank you. Ming.
So Shannon like almost took exactly what I was going to say. So I'm going to try and spin it so it's like slightly different. But I was just going to say, as a former teacher, my hope through all of this work is that we are not only going to be helping our students become better learners, but supporting our teachers, because it's a really difficult job. And so my hope is that the things that the changes that we are rolling out will have that positive impact that has a ripple effect throughout our district. And I just want to add that Jen and I have been so lucky to have so many great conversations with principals and teachers and groups of schools. So if you have any other questions or just want that face-to-face time with one of us, please feel free to reach out. We are always available to be there for you in whatever way that you need. And then, because apparently there are secondary people on here, you can reach out to Kyle or Jen Kyle Addington, who is also on our team. So just wanted to share that.
Awesome. Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, thanks for letting me listen in, Randy. And two things for me. Number one, just really appreciate the opportunity that you provide to give us a forum to connect with teachers and with principals across the district. It's just really great. And so the 8 people on this call, giving them the opportunity to share what their work is, and they've worked so incredibly hard and done so much in such a limited time period, and really always thinking about students first and how to make sure that teachers are supported. And a few months back, when we made the decision to accelerate some of these strategic initiatives, we did so knowing that we needed to step up to the plate for teachers to make sure that when they started the year next fall, that they were in the best position to be successful for kids, that we were going to hit the ground running, that they were going to have the resources and the structures and the support they need to have a great year next year. And this team has not slowed down one bit. They've been 100% the entire time. They continue to be that way. So just really appreciate the opportunity to let them share that work and continue to get this to a place where we feel like we're going to really be successful starting next year.
Excellent. And finally, our amazing science duo, Jen and Sam.
Sure. So please know that this whole process is iterative. We will not come out perfect, and that will be okay. And we will learn and we will grow together in this process. And we will have some opportunities. I think even the first one is going to be coming out this evening from our instructional practices team. We're going to be gathering resources from our teachers. We don't want to reinvent the wheel when we don't have to. There's good stuff in this system already to be leveraging. So bringing in the teachers through resource sharing, through some spring unit development, as well as the summer. So within the next few days, please look for those opportunities to get involved. And please know that this is iterative and we'll work together.
Awesome. Sam.
Yeah. So Randy, yeah, thank you for giving us the opportunity to share this work with our teachers. And a big thank you to the more than 100 people that I see that joined us watching on the live stream, 7 a.m. on the first day back from spring break. So thanks so much for caring enough about the year at a glance and scope and sequence to be here with us. I think the one thing that I would also want to highlight, because I don't think we got an opportunity to talk much about it today, is that there is a very conscious effort throughout all the work that's being done on the prioritization of standards and building the year at a glance to ensure that we're doing this through a lens of culturally responsive pedagogy, that we're really building every set of tools and resources through the lens of this has to be good for our culturally and linguistically diverse students. And that's a really important design principle that we've been applying to everything that we do. And I think having that be at the core of what we're doing and putting this in the hands of our amazing teachers that we have out in the field, I believe that we're going to have some really amazing outcomes for kids. And I believe if any district can close an achievement gap, it's BVSD. And if we're all in this together, we're all committed to this work, that we can make that happen for our kids. And that to me is the absolute most exciting thing about all of this.
I don't think I could have said it better. I think that what we know is that our teachers, our educators are amazing. And so, we're putting this in your hands to a certain extent. We're trying to solve some district issues and really make sure that's good. I think whether it's the tragedy that happened, a week ago or this situation, please know that there is help and support here in this district. Reach out if you're confused or worried about this at all. We don't want you to lose sleep about this. This is really exciting work. And as Sam said, I think that no other district is as well positioned to be able to solve the large issue that we've got. So I do want to thank all of our panelists. Thank you for staying with me in overtime here in order to answer people's questions and really, really wrap things up well. I want to thank all of you out there for tuning in, and I hope that you have a great week. Thanks.